In this video on Skull and Bones, I'm going to be talking about the Brigantine ship. I'm going to give you a build that works for me and why you should use this ship for certain things. The Brigantine is the 9th ship available in the game. It is a medium-sized ship that is classified as a DPS ship that is meant for dealing damage. The biggest difference on this ship is its perk. It is a bullhorn perk, increases the damage from ramming by 45%. So this is actually a huge part of the ship that you really need to start combat with by literally ramming your ship into enemy ships. You'll also reduce the duration of torn sails by 80%. So if your sails get torn, you know, they only lost 20% of the time, which is great. And it also applies flooded to an enemy ship when ramming, which is going to be a huge key factor on how you want to deal damage as a Brigantine. You want to focus on flooding damage. Here you have the basic stats of the ship, but we're going to be talking about this throughout the video. You'll see here it has 5 weapon placements and it has 5 furniture slots. The first and most important thing to know about the Brigantine is that it is the fastest ship in the game by a lot. Its top speed by default is 18 knots, which is incredible. It's much faster than most of the other ships that you'll encounter in the game. However, it does come with a much lower stamina. You can already see my stamina bar is already at like the halfway mark, and you can see it draining over time as we move onwards into this, this battle that we're about to engage. And because we have the bullhorn perk for this ship, a lot of our damage actually comes from ramming. Ramming is a strategy that you should begin every single fight with. I will talk about all the different weapons and how I've built this Brigantine as we get towards the end of the video. I just wanted to preface that you have the speed, but you do have the lack of stamina, which means you're going to have to constantly eat grilled food that adds, plus stamina pretty much all the time, which can get a little frustrating if you're, just trying to get things done. The health of the ship isn't the greatest, and the brace strength, which is when you hold the brace key, the shield one, so this over here, is much lower than some other ships like the Snow, for example. So taking damage as a Brigantine means it's very easy to sink, and you'll see in this clip over here, when you fight 4 rogue ships at once, it's really easy to get overwhelmed and take too much damage, and the cooldown time on repair kits is just not enough to repair your ship in time. You will also have to focus on foods that increase your stamina efficiency, your stamina regen, something like the Godro, which is made with flour and coconuts pretty much at all of your cooking stations. This is something you're going to have active pretty much all the time just so that you can not suffer with stamina as much as you usually do. Now, there are multiple instances where I'll recommend this ship over others. The first one is by actually going to all your factories and, collecting all the coins from each of your factories. Because of the high speed, you go across here and every so often you'll get one rogue ship that attacks you that you can deal with. But doing stuff like orders is going to be a lot more difficult because the rogue ships will spawn everywhere, and fighting much stronger ships is not really the strength of the Brigantine. There are much better options for fighting than using the Brigantine, to be honest, at least safely. So if you're doing something that requires a lot of traveling, far distances, but is relatively safe to do, you can use the Brigantine 100% of the time to make things, go a lot smoother because of that speed that you can reach, which lets you finish things a lot more timely. Now, if you play the Brigantine correctly, you're going to want to be doing a lot of ramming, which means you're going to play from far and then you're going to rush into an enemy, but it's very dangerous to be close to enemies because you take a lot of damage. So you want to kind of like ram and then move out of range to circle back in. And ramming also applies flooded to an enemy ship upon ramming them, which is something that we're going to take advantage of with the weapon types and, the playstyle that we're going to use. Now, initially, the game doesn't track this very well, and I recommend actually going to your settings and going over to interface right over here, and then go customize user interface. And the first 2 options, behavior icon, have this on just so that you know if ships are attacking you or not. And the status effects icons for things like flooded or on fire, it lets you know that if, ships are actually on fire or how far they are from being flooded and taking the damage over time from the flooded effect. It gives you an idea of like what you're actually doing, because without this, you kind of just have to guess or like wait for the ship to burst into flames or look like it's flooded, which can be confusing. So I highly recommend turning these 2 settings on. Now let's look at the build that I'm using for my Brigantine. Now you can, of course, swap and change weapons that you prefer. There's many different playstyles and they can work across the board. It's just these are ones that I feel benefit me the most when I'm playing the Brigantine. Starting out with the weapons, on the front I have a nice torpedo system that deals, flood damage, explosion damage. It's the Shayley 282 power. It's really decent at letting me add that extra, flooded damage before I actually ram them, so that once I do ram them, they're pretty much almost in a flooded state. But I do have a way to guarantee that enemy ships are flooded very early on. Now you'll see on my left side, this is my weaker side that I don't normally engage on combat with, and I have a long gun, version 5, 90 power, nothing too crazy. Honestly, you can swap this out for whatever you feel like. I use this because I don't really have weapons that are long range in cases where I have to maybe fight a building, or if I want to snipe, like the raid weaknesses on ships that are a little too far, then I'm going to use this to angle that. On the right-hand side of the ship, I have the Flooding Demi Cannon 3, power 98. Of course, these add a lot of flooding damage, and you can shoot them pretty often. It's got a really high reload speed, and you just have to be right next to an enemy ship. And this is like right after you ram them, you're next to them, try keep them on your right side right after, and then you just spam a couple of these, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be in a flooded state and taking damage over time. You can use your crew attacks almost immediately after that, and you'll see with one of the furnitures that we have, we actually get a 15% damage increase from doing a crew attack. So it's just how the system that I'm using works. At the very back of the ship, I'm using a Bombard, just the normal Bombard 5 with 90 power, really strong attack to use. Pretty much when I'm trying to gain some distance from an enemy, I can quickly aim behind me and shoot a couple of these just to get a little bit of extra damage as I'm moving away. And on the auxiliary part of the ship, we have the option between mortars and rockets. I actually am favoring mortars a lot more on this ship because you're going to use this as you're getting prepared for your ramming. You're going to use your torpedoes. You're going to use the mortar to aim where the enemy ship is going to be so that this hits them, and then you're going to ram them pretty much at the same time, and then use your flooding demi cannons on them. And that's like the whole strategy. And then you're just going to loop around and just use whatever is convenient to you. For the armor of the ship, I have the Royal Custodian, which you can see in a previous video that I've made. I'll link it in the description down below on how to easily get one of these. I, as you can see, have 3 of them. For the furniture, this affects the build of your ship, like what damage is buffed and what, gets increases based on how you play. So in the furniture here, my very first one is increased damage by 15% after a crew attack for 30 seconds. So once you do that firing muskets attack, you're going to get 30 seconds of a 15% increase to your damage that you do. You need this so when there are like tough battles out there, you need this for the extra damage. For the second slot here, I have increased damage from ramming by 25%. So this goes on top of the original 45% that we get because we're the Brigantine ship. So that turns it into a nice hefty 70% extra ramming damage. So if you ram a ship at full speed and you hit them like as much as you can in the side of their ship, you're going to do a ton of damage and apply a ton of flooding as well, which is great. Our third furniture piece is a elemental damage multiplier for the torpedo. So this increases the flooding and stuff that your torpedoes do, which you should get like 2 or 3 shots off before you hit an enemy ship. The fourth furniture slot is going to be increases the charge rate of crew attack by 10%. This means that you can use a crew attack 10% more often, which means that you get that 15% damage increase more often for the 30 seconds as well, so that you keep cycling your damage increase. And for our final furniture slot here, we have increases damage from auxiliary weapons by 10%. This is the mortar. This is our hardest hitting weapon. It does a ton of damage. If you can land the middle circle of this thing on the middle of the ship, it's going to do a ton. And if we can increase that by 10%, it's a big increase that we can do. And that's pretty much the build that I'm using on the Brigantine. If you want to copy or, get something of an idea of how I'm playing it, you might have a completely different build of your own that works for you too, which is, currently I don't think there's like one is better than the other. It doesn't seem that way. Just different instances of different types of battles work differently for me. Like I have another ship that works in a completely different way that is also very powerful. Alright, so let's talk about how you're going to engage with combat. Like I did say when we were looking at the weapons, that you're always going to want to start out with your mortar, and you're going to want to try place it in front of the enemy ship. You can see this one's moving a little too quickly. I got to try get it where it's going to hit them where I think they're going to sail into. So him, I think he's going to go into that location over there. And you can see that's going to hit him nice and easy. Boom. And then we can go ahead and we can start using torpedoes. As we run here, we're going to go for the ram strategy, and you're going to try aim where you think this ship is going to be going. And somehow he's managed to dodge everything. And now we're going to ram him directly in the side here. Boom, just like that. And that honestly works for most ships to take them out in one nice swift swoop, if you do get it correctly. Now let's talk about our port side and our starboard type weapons. Our starboard, the right hand side, is going to be our short range flooding demi cannons. As you can see here, it's going to apply flooding pretty easily. You can see it's almost there. Boom, now it's active, and you'll see they'll start to drain HP as we just sail around them. You can also use this time to, you know, board the crew, use your crew attack. You can see they're just going to die to the flooding anyway, just like that. I don't even have to do anything else. And that's why the flooding of the ship is pretty damn good. And that was like a level 10 ship, so not too bad. On our left-hand side, we do have the long guns, so if there is a ship in range that we're, you know, like fighting multiple ships, like you have one next to you and you have one on the left, you can go ahead and use 4 shots of the long gun. You're going to want to aim specifically at the red weakness points with this cannon, because if not, it's not really worth it. You really want to be hitting those weak spots with the left-hand side. And if there is a ship behind you, you can go ahead and use the bombard to get some extra damage as you're making distance from ships. Maybe you're losing a fight, or you've just rammed and you've sailed away. You want to like get a few more bombards in there as you reposition to get into a better angle so that you can shoot other cannons, either your long guns or loop around to get a nice, you know, mortar shell back in. And once you get close enough for the ram, you're going to use the demiguns. So that's like the whole system at play on how I play the Brigantine. I'm sure there's people out there who have a completely different system of how they play their own Brigantine that can work for them. But I know a lot of people have been asking me, like, what ship do I use? What weapons do I use? And, you know, this is pretty much it. And that is how I play the Brigantine. I hope you guys enjoyed this build video. If you have your own builds that you feel work for you, feel free to share them in the comments down below. And thank you guys so much for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.